That's the main stuff. I want to say, Lindsay Schmidl, I'm so glad you're here today. So if you don't know, yeah, I know, Lindsay. So Lindsay's at Gingerly Press, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And she makes really stunning work. We've shown your work here at Hamilton, both in the New Impressions exhibition that we do yearly. We've had a complete display of your work, a pop-up exhibition and show and shop last year, which was really exciting. The people of Two Rivers came out and we had a great conversation here at the museum, which was really nice.
That was awesome.
Yes, it's great. Lindsay makes work that is hand set, wood and metal type. She does stunning designs and your color palette is always on point. That's for sure. So I am gonna hand it over. I'll let you take it over. I'll pin your video, I'll spotlight you so everybody can see what you're up to. And then thank you all for joining us and we'll get started. Thanks, Lindsay.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming out. This is awesome to see so many cool faces. Oh, and now I see my face. Awesome. Yeah, so I am Lindsay Schmidl. I have Gingerly Press, as Steph said. I'm sitting back in my little office area of Gingerly Press right now. I will take you for a bit of a tour and I'm going to show you some work, but otherwise I'm going to keep it pretty informal. Feel free to ask questions as I go along. I'm not offended or don't have any like set speech in any way. So just, I'm going to go through some stuff that I've been working on since COVID and give you a tour of the shop. But I thought I'd start with a little bit of background. So in college is when I went to the University of Delaware and I was a graphic design major, well, visual communications technically. I was kind of like the oddball in my class that really always liked to hang out in the fine art studio a lot more than sitting at my computer and doing a lot of digital design work. And I just think it was like, I didn't know what typography even was when I was in high school. Like I didn't know anything about graphic design. And I was very much art is with your hands. So I think I really did fall in love with typography through my visual communications schooling and classes, but I was really kind of sad about just like sitting at my computer all day. And in my own, like in the last 5 years since owning my own business and working by myself all day, I think I've realized I have like a little bit of ADD. So like, I think that might also have to do with it, that I like to be moving and producing. Another reason I was drawn towards letterpress in school was I would get really frustrated when I would work really hard on the computer on some project and then hit Control P and it was the wrong size, the wrong colors, the opacity layers got weird, like, and it just was never what it looked like on the screen. And so when I found letterpress, and we had a letterpress studio called Raven Press at the University of Delaware, who Ray Nichols, along with another guy, Bill Deering, helped start. I really kind of discovered this hands-on process where I could have typography but hands-on at the same time. And I can control that Control P, you know, so I could completely mix my own colors and be as anal as I wanted about getting my color palette right. And yeah, it really gave me control over the process and it was just fun because you know, I'm doing something different every day. I could be cutting paper, I could be designing at the computer a little bit, but I'm not gonna be doing that all day. And by the end of the day, I might be setting some type, packaging some product, shipping out orders, all sorts of different things. So yeah, so in college I got into it through Raven Press. I took a letterpress class there, felt like I really needed more education in it. And so I was the TA for the class the following semester. And then I had taken a couple of workshops with Light Graffiti, with Ray and Jill of Light Graffiti, who I know are on this call. They've been good buddies of mine when I started my business. Ray had retired from University of Delaware at that time. And so, but I knew that he had a shop like down the street and not far away. And I knew that he was really kind of a master printer. And so I felt like if I was going to learn more about the craft, that he was the guy to go to who would, you know, take me under his wing. And he definitely took me under his wing and I'm so appreciative for it. So my senior year of school, I did an internship for 5 weeks in Chicago with Star Shape Press. Jen, actually, she's not on the call today because she texted me yesterday saying she's got a lot to do. But she's awesome, and I learned so much from her that winter in Star Shaped. Also, Chicago's the worst time to go in the winter. I don't know why you would visit there for the first time ever in winter, but it was great. Besides that. And yeah, through her, I learned so much about metal typesetting. And also the great surprise, I didn't know that I was going to learn from her because everything on her website said we. So I thought, like, when I got there, I was like, oh yeah, there's a chance that I might get hired by her. She's got a big company. She's a we, you know. Well, the we is referring to her and Joe, her daughter. So I'm like, oh, okay. She's a one-woman business and probably won't be hiring me right away by any means. But I loved interning for her, and I thought it was such a cool way to learn and see how a business is operated by one woman, one person. And got to see how she prepped for craft fairs and how she, you know, communicated with clients. And I got to see all this behind the scenes stuff that was so much more than just the craft of letterpress. And that was super helpful, and gave me a big, like, confidence boost that, okay, like, this might have to be the way that I get into letterpress, is starting my own thing, because that was not my intention when I first got into letterpress printing. By the last week of that 5-week internship, I had gotten, Jen had gotten an email that was like forwarded probably from like 5 of you guys, who it was just forwarded and forwarded. It was a 1-line email that said, hey, this guy with this phone number is, if you're really serious about it, contact him. He's selling his shop. He's 87 years old. So that guy was Henry Morris. Photo's a little dusty. This is him and me on the day that I bought his press. And moving day in 2013. So before I graduated college, I luckily went to school for free because my mom worked at UVD, and I got to have some money saved up in order to buy this first slot of equipment. And Henry's first press became my first press. So that was really cool, kind of full circle for that press. Yeah, and so he had Bird and Bull Press in Philly. I recognized his phone number as 215. I called him the next day and was like, hey, I think I need to go tour your stuff. That's when Ray and I started becoming better friends, because I was like, I have no idea how much this stuff costs and like how to haggle with this 87-year-old man. And so I called up Ray and I was like, hey, Ray, you know, I think I need like one guy against another guy, and I just like need you there to like, you know, kind of back me up and like make sure that I'm not getting ripped off. And also you can have at like some of the stuff after I get first dibs. So he and I took a 2-hour drive and we moved the equipment into my shop like the following week. And my shop was half of my parents' garage, because my parents were so awesome. And by the time I got back from Chicago, they had cleared out their storage in half the garage and made it a little space for me. Last summer, I moved that entire studio across the state to Pittsburgh, here in this studio space. Finally flapped my wings after a handful of other like sidetracking projects along the way, which I'll mention. But yeah, and so now I'm here in Pittsburgh. I think about this time last year, I was packing up the studio and printing my Ham Fam poster for Ham at 20. Because I was like, I know that that's due in August and my shop's gonna be in a moving truck in August, so I need to get that done. So yeah, so that's kind of my background of how I got here. And yeah, I am a full-time business here in Pittsburgh. I've got a little space here that I'll tour you around. I'm going to bring you over to show you a project that I did. Most of the projects I'm going to show you are within the COVID time. And you can kind of see the shop as I'm walking away. I will slow down for a tour, don't worry. But I wanted to show you, this is going to be difficult with a computer. So the printed walk. So this was a big project that I had done, and Steph had mentioned that was up at Hamilton last year on display, which was super cool. Basically, I had this big crazy idea that I wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. And I had this idea, I think it spurred from the book Wild. I was like, okay, if she can do it, I can probably do it, because she did it like all wrong. And I, have a little bit better sense about the outdoors. And so I had this big idea, but I was like, how the hell am I going to do that when I have a full-time business? Because you're going to be out on the trail for like 6 months. And so I came up with this Kickstarter idea, which was called the Printed Walk, Georgia to Maine. So I did a Kickstarter in fall 2016, unfortunately right over the election. And luckily I did a 45-day Kickstarter to let people grieve and then come back to life a little bit. And so basically the premise of the project is that I did one poster for every 100 miles of the project, or every 100 miles of the trail, sorry. So the trail is 2,190 miles. So that's 22 prints rounded up the last 10 miles. So that's what the project is. I feel like this is going to be hard to show you flipping through, but I will do my best. So I made these clamshells down at Leg Graffiti because Ray had showed me how to make clamshells one time. We made some clamshells side by side. Sorry. Okay, here we go. So yeah, I'm not going to necessarily flip through this whole thing for fear of dropping my computer on the floor. But basically the pieces are all at least 4 or 5 color prints. And then on the back, they have the story that talks about, this is the story here. That is basically a moment from that 100-mile section of the trail that really kind of explains the imagery on the front. The prints are fairly abstract. And this was definitely like a new direction for me with letterpress printing. To move away from more ornamental stuff and move into some more abstract stuff. But it was very fun because I got to get a little bit more experimental with it. For example, this light gray in the background here, this whole print was about the wildfires that were down in North Carolina in fall 2016. And when I came across it in spring 2017, the entire mountainside was just black. There was no green to be seen. So I had picked up some charcoal from some of the trees that were burnt to a crisp, ground it up with mortar and pestle when I got home. I shipped it home and then ground it up with mortar and pestle, mixed it with transparent white ink. And that's the color that this gray, the light gray is. So that's directly from the color of those trees. So there's a handful of things within the series like this that were fun ways to experiment with some new things and kind of broaden my own skill set with letterpress. And it was just a massive project overall in terms of just scale. I did 75 prints of each of those designs, each of those 22 designs. So that was a lot. There was paper everywhere. So that was a cool project that kind of sidetracked me for a little bit before I moved out of my parents' garage. But it was a good one to do, so I didn't have to pay overhead while being on the trail for 5.5 months. So there's a lot more to that project, but we can dig into that another time, I figure. And I will take you on a little tour of the studio now. You can kind of see it over my shoulder here. Got 2 big windows at the end, but I'm going to start you at the door. I'm going to make sure I have my keys so I don't lock myself out.
That would add to a very exciting ham hang.
What?
It would be a very exciting ham hang at that point.
It's like, okay, so we have to walk all the way across Lawrenceville back to my house to get my spare keys. I'll bring my computer. So I'm kind of at the front door of the studio now, but I just want to show you the courtyard real quick because I'm in a building that is full of other artists, which is super cool. Got my keys, so we're safe. So over my shoulder here, we're in this big U-shaped building. They just did this courtyard this past fall and winter. So I'm like right in the one door here. This is kind of my outside, this is my studio door. It needs some decals and stuff, and it's pretty empty out here in the hallway. I had this full of plants before COVID, and then I had to bring them all home. So now I'm in the studio at the front door. So right upon walking in the door, I had designed these display shelves for all my product. And my dad, who's a master carpenter from YouTube, he just built those. right away. And he doesn't charge for labor, he just charges for materials, so it's great. Yeah, so I have these upon walking in the studio, and you can see some of my work here. I'll show you some more without clear sleeves on them. I've got a little kitchenette here, which is handy dandy because I've got my own sink, and then microwave, a little, you know, basically that I can sustain myself while I'm working at the studio from like 12 hours a day. So over my head, this might be the best way to do it. So, okay. This is kind of the studio, like when I'm walking right past the kitchenette and everything. I built these 2 big tables with my dad last August, with flat files underneath them. The way that I had really envisioned this studio was making it a workshop space, which obviously right now is very limited to just one-person workshops, me. Yeah, I've got these nice big tables. I've got some paper shelving that we built. There were a bunch of built-in desks in this space when I moved in, and my dad and I tore those apart, and they make great shelves. And then kind of going back from there, we've got more of the shop, and this is kind of like the letterpress side. You can see like the new wood versus the old wood as we transition from paper area to dusty type area. So let's see here. So right here, we've got, this would have a press on it right here. That press, once COVID hit and I was kicked out of my studio for 2 weeks, is up in my house currently, and I need my buddy to help me bring it back. Just another little proofing press. And then here's another one. I had acquired those 2 in the last like 6 months. The one that's at my house I got for $50 from a guy across the river, which was amazing. He thought $50 was too much for it, and I was like, you're crazy. Got some furniture racks and things. But yeah, these 2 proofing presses were really, this whole front section was really kind of set up for workshops. I had done everything to launch my BYOB print nights. Even printed up 500 of these flyers that are so conveniently dated 2020. And somebody last minute in my last critique from somebody was like, you should have the date on there. And I was now kicking myself for doing so. So we're going to be we're not printing new ones. We're just going to print across through that last 0. And yeah, so I had like completely prepped this whole space, launched workshops back in March, booked my first couple, which was super exciting, and then had to cancel all of them once shit hit the fan with COVID. So it's okay, we pivot. So yeah, so walking through here, this is my main cabinet for wood type. This one I had gotten when I got my little SP15 here. That was another road trip with Ray up to Asbury Park, New Jersey to get this combo. This press was kind of the color of my hair when we got it. It took 3 days with a lot of elbow grease to clean that baby up to get it functioning. It's got a client print on it that I had finished up in June. It was a Father's Day gift, a woman in Pittsburgh here. Basically, her dad had written a whole list of things that he had learned from his father when his father passed. They have a family business that's been passed down through generations, and she wanted to have it printed out for her dad, who's the one who wrote it, for Father's Day. So that was a quick 1-week turnaround job, but I was happy to have it because 3 out of my 4 wedding clients have all postponed till next year. Yeah, so I've got my leading reglets on this side. So we've kind of got the studio here split by this double type case here. So I'm going down the Vandercook side, running into things. Composing stick. This poster from Eric Speakerman, which I got at Hamilton, is like motto for life because I'm a perfectionist and always have been, and it's been a battle. And then let's see, we've got the big press here. So this guy is the one that was from Henry. It's from 1915, Chandler and Price. This was Henry's first press, and it was my first press. So I call him Sullivan. He's very sentimental. He's my favorite baby. And then we get back into this corner here by this window, and this is kind of the sharps corner to stay away from workshop participants. So this is the guillotine with my avocado tree, which is so wonky and weird. And this guy is probably the oldest guy in my shop. It's from 1909. I got it for $100 from a guy in my AFA group, and it cost me more to move it. So, but it was awesome. Also the color of my hair when I bought it. This is a saw, one of the glider saws from Henry. Honestly, when Henry was bundling things for me to like buy like his shop, essentially, he like pointed to the saw, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm gonna use that for. And I was just like, yeah, sure. I'm gonna fake it till I make it. And I'm so glad I bought that saw because I use it all the time. I got this little handy dandy corner rounder guy from the guy who sold me the press for $50. He was laughing at me when I wanted that too. And I was like, what? You're crazy. So yeah, that's great. I haven't gotten it up and working yet. I need to sharpen the blade. So now we're on the other side of that type case. And this is kind of like type alley here. And as you can see, it's kind of all pulled out. I've got all my spacing units pulled out because I was sitting here setting a wedding invite, my last bride who did stick with 2020 for her date. So I was starting a wedding invite here. That's kind of the digital design. That's something I had learned from Jen at Star Shaped, was that she has, I mean, if you watched her ham hang, which I just watched the rerun of on YouTube, she's got her giant deck of her entire shop's specimens, which is amazing, and that's like life goals for me. I'm in no way there yet. But she could design digitally, and when I interned for her, she would just hand me a design like this. You see all the folds in it because that's me matching the spacing and the letter spacing for the actual type to the design. So I do not have all my types scanned in by any means, but when I have a client, I like scan their names in and proof a whole bunch of stuff on proofing presses, scan it in, and then design here. So yeah, so this is current project for the week. Yeah, getting that one out the door because it's been in the works since like last fall, which is crazy. Yeah, so that's kind of the shop. Generally speaking, oh yeah, and then my little office corner in the back, I guess that was where I started. Move back there. Yeah, so got a little couch for midday naps, the last desk, the only built-in desk that I kept in the studio, and yeah, it's nice and light filled in that corner for when I have to do computer work. It at least makes me happy being in natural light. So yeah, so that's kind of the studio. I'm going to show you a couple prints here. Let me grab, I had a master list so I don't miss anything.
That's a beautiful studio space, Lindsay. It is breathtaking.
Thank you. I love the brick on this wall. The exposed brick with like the chipped paint. It was all covered up when I moved in with like masonite boards and stuff for like using as tacking things to the wall. And I was like, this is crazy. So I pulled all that down. And then this entire wall was a bright lime green. So I had to paint it all, and I have yet to hang much artwork. This whole wall behind me, I hope to load up with a whole bunch of your guys' artwork that inspires me. So like a little gallery wall for inspiration there. Obviously, no offense, guys, but it's not my priority at the moment. I'm just trying to keep the business afloat. So anyway, I thought I'd share some stuff that I've been working on since COVID because we all had to do a big pivot with that. And then I thought we'd just open it up to conversation and questions and whatever else. Yeah, so let's see here. So I had started with workshops, and I told you about that. The day that so back in March, like the day that everything hit the fan with COVID, was the day that I had come into the studio and had prepped to print 6 notebook covers, 6 brand new notebook covers. I even like had it all worked out that I could do all the colors like within, like all the mustard's gonna get printed now. So I could do it in the most efficient way to get all 6 done at once. And that I got an email that morning that was like, hey, you need to be out of the studio by 5 p.m. And I was like, what? Panic. So turns out it was okay. I was booted out for like 2 weeks because of COVID. And then enough of us in the building were like, there's no way we're going to survive. And they let us back in. But those notebooks, so far I've only printed 2 of them. I've decided to just do 2 at a time and just launch them sequentially just over time. So the last 4 will be coming out between now and like Christmas at some point. So look for those. These are, so I already had one that I had printed last December. I had started doing these larger journals because these are the sizes that I like to use. They were also the sizes that I had done for the printed walk. I had done 3 different sizes of notebooks as like small rewards for the Kickstarter. And a lot of people were raving about the large size and were begging me to make like a regular selection of those. So that was a big project that kind of underwent this past winter. So I printed those 2 beginning, and then COVID was just kind of weird. I was stuck at home for a while, for at least 2 weeks there. I happened to have some paper at home, just old cardstock. When I was in college, I did a lot of cut paper, along with like cut paper illustrations, and then did letterpress printing, and then did some ceramic stuff too. And I was like very torn between all 3 of those at one point. But so I broke out my like old stack of cut paper from college and I was like, okay, well, this could be a really good way to just get some ideas out for things that I would later want to print. So I started making some little landscapes. I was thinking about everybody being isolated. I do this little red tent a lot. It was throughout my entire printed walk series, and it's in a lot of my other work. So I was thinking about everybody just being isolated on their own little island. And so I had a lot of floating landscapes going on, just like weird and funky. Then some abstract ones that were more based off of some hikes I had done in May. These 4 were a series that I did when I was just watching the sunset at my house and then the moonrise. So it was just very much like just making things to make things. I feel like it was a little therapeutic for me at the time because I was definitely feeling a little doomsday with like all like 6 or 7 of my craft fairs that were lined up for spring being canceled. So I was just making something to make me happy. And so those were a lot of fun. And I still like to dig into the cut paper just in the evening sometimes. Just as like a way to make art that doesn't feel like it has to be a product in the product line, basically. So I did those, and that was super fun. In no way have I tried to monetize them, but it has opened up the idea that I've thought about printing like textures and wood type and all sorts of stuff and cutting it up and making like one-of-a-kind collages on like larger pieces of paper with like using prints. And just opens that idea that could happen. Who knows what will happen in the real life. When I started this year, I was really trying to focus on like building out my own artwork and I started, because I just moved to a new city, I started introducing myself as a letterpress artist instead of a letterpress printer. And then people were always then questioning what is letterpress, and then I would explain. But if I say that I'm an artist instead of a printer, I automatically get respected as more of an illustrator and somebody who makes their own pieces, which is something that I do, and it's just one part of my business, but it's what I really wanted to push as most of my business. But when I say I'm a letterpress printer, it's like automatically somebody's like, "Ooh, will you do my business cards?" And I'm like, yeah, kind of over that right now. So full intention this past early 2020 was to completely dissolve my like custom inquiries for printing as of this summer, after I finished up those 4 weddings, which are now postponed until next year except for the one. COVID has basically forced me to pivot and be like, okay, so you can't just not take on custom work right now because workshops are done, craft fairs are done, all sorts of other open houses are done. It was a bad year to move to a new city, basically. You know, luckily I made some friends in the last like couple months before COVID hit, so I'm not like completely isolated here, but like, it's a weird year. But luckily I had 2 rush custom jobs come in in June to kind of fill the spot of those weddings. The one was on the Vandercook there, the Father's Day one. That one was cool, but this one was one that I was much more excited about. This was a collaboration with Duolingo. So Duolingo, you might recognize the logo more than anything, but they're a language app to learn languages. It's an app that I actually regularly use to brush up on my Spanish. But they're based here in Pittsburgh, and it was awesome that they just completely out of the blue reached out to me. I think I met a person or two at a craft fair last December who worked there. I don't know if it's the contact person I was with or what, but their little character is an owl for Duolingo's brand, and they have a different green than this. But when they came to me, they were like, hey, we want you to make, we need like 250 to 300 greeting cards that we're going to send to our employees. We want to have this like little bingo board on the inside. It's for happy Duoversary. It's for their Duo bingo. So they super nerdy, but I loved them. It was great. They were very easy to work with and super friendly. Basically, they were just sending these all out to their employees for their anniversary of their company. And they have like 300 employees. So they were super cool. And what's great about companies is they don't bat an eye at pricing. And they gave me like total creative freedom with it too, which was awesome. I mean, they sent me like generally what they wanted for this bingo board, and I just tried to clean it up a little bit to make it a little bit nicer. And I got a plate made for that. But they wanted me to make my own version of an owl and then pick a green that inspires me. So this is, shout out to French Paper. This is their Fuse Green. Which actually, after I printed it, matches that couch back there like perfectly, which is like kind of scary. But so that color is very much like part of my color scheme, I guess. But yeah, so I was really happy with how this turned out. I like that they picked the weirdest owl of all the owls that I gave them. And yeah, so we've got some cool, there's definitely some skyline type in there that was like from their alpha blocks, I believe. And then this is more wood type, I believe. This is an antique copper cut. This eye was actually a linoleum cut because the circle I had was dented, and then metal type. So it was a cool little combo of like a whole bunch of different things in letterpress. So that was fun. Then right after that, the very tragic death of George Floyd happened, and like Black Lives Matter movement was like really going, and it was super cool to see, honestly, to just like see this uprising be like take on so much more momentum, especially within like the white community, which I think hasn't been normal in the past. There's a big protest happening in Pittsburgh, and they happen every Saturday, but there was like a big one happening early on. And I was in the middle of this Duolingo job, which was a rush job in 2 weeks. And I was like, oh crap, like I gotta go print these. They wanted me to hand address all 300 of these too, which took 8 hours, but they paid me for it, thank God. But I was like, okay, we need to print some posters or something to hand out at this march. So I printed these two. It was like a quick day printing, just like one color, get it on press, which honestly is like really satisfying after I spend like a lot of time designing my products before going to press with them. So it was just satisfying to like throw type on press and like no computer designs, just, you know, like the way that so many other people work that like, I don't know, it takes a lot out of me to like work that way sometimes. So it was very fun to make these. I had a big stack of like 75 or 100, and I left a whole bunch out in a print rack outside my studio before the protests and just posted on Instagram, and they were gone within 2 hours, which was super cool. And I brought another stack to the protest that Saturday, and they were gone within like 3 minutes of the protest, which was super cool. And I have some great photos of them like all around the protest, which was just like really cool to see the power of print, honestly. And you're like, wow, like just one quick decision to throw something on press could affect this many people is just like really empowering. And so that was just really cool to see. And so now they're up on my site. Normally my 14 by 18 prints are at least $40, but these guys are $15. $5 to cover my costs of paper and, you know, clear sleeve and all the kinds of things. And then the other 10 goes to a Black Lives Matter organization, and I've been switching that up each month. So yeah, we sent like 350, which I know I've got a couple more I need to send over, but at least like almost $400 now to at least we sent it to Black Lives Matter Global Network back in June. And so that was super cool. And I'm going to talk about some other things that I'm going to be working on in the future. One of those is to start doing some postcards that we can start sending to reps and senators leading up to election time. So some of those will be Black Lives Matter, and then some of those will also be ones for environmental justice, because that's traditionally has kind of always been like the focus of my business in terms of social or environmental justice issues. Yeah, so after those posters, I had my next subscription print to do. So I have a subscription. This is my little shameless plug here. I've got a subscription and it's called Hot Off the Press. Basically, every quarter of the year, you get a 6x8 print shipped in an envelope to you in the mail. So these are the ones, I launched this last March, 2019. So I only have 6 of them so far, but this was last Q1, Q2, Q3, 4. This was Q1 this year. And then this is the one that I just did in June here, June, July, and shipped off at the very end of Q2. But the subscription's been awesome. For the past, it's been $49 for 4 prints. The whole idea is that it's just whatever is like hot off the press. The idea is that like, these aren't meant to be sitting in a series necessarily. I work within a color palette for all my work, so they should hypothetically work together in some way and not clash too bad. But otherwise, it's really kind of whatever I want to make, which is really freeing and fun to like make something for people that is just like, yep, we'll see what comes out. And I usually like print it, and the stack of fresh prints is still sitting over on the CMP over there. And then like immediately the next day I'm shipping out to subscribers. So they're very much hot off the press, and I wouldn't doubt if sometimes you get a little tacky ink on them. Yeah, Steph has been an awesome supporter. She always orders 2 subscriptions so that she can give one.
I do. They're wonderful gifts. I love them.
Yeah, they're awesome. So they're very fun, and they're fun to do. And yeah, so that's something that, yeah. But yeah, so I made this next print. So let's celebrate diversity. So basically in the past, everything I've done, all of my trees have been carnivorous trees. So like past products are all some kind of carnivorous tree. That's just what I had developed first, which seemed the most obviously like trees. And last fall, believe it or not, was when I started designing a bunch of deciduous trees. And I was like, okay, I want to launch these sometime in the spring and have like a whole deciduous tree launch to kind of go with these coniferous trees. Back in May, I was taking a handful of hikes to stay sane, and I was just learning about biodiversity and forests and how important it is to have a healthy forest, to have a mixture of native plants and not just like one kind of tree or one kind of plant. And so I was digging into research about that, and I was like, you know what, I probably shouldn't just launch, you know, deciduous trees, and then I have like carnivorous and deciduous. I should instead like promote this idea of how biodiversity is like for the win. That's where this came up with, where I was mixing the trees. It's a spring color palette. And yeah, it's all about let's celebrate diversity. Let's celebrate biodiversity. Let's celebrate diversity. It's kind of a metaphor. And honestly, this idea happened in May, before everything with Black Lives Matter came about, and it just feels very fitting now. Yeah, and appropriate as always. So yeah, so what I'm working on now is a whole bunch of new biodiverse forest products. So I was going to have a little bit of a slideshow for you guys, but yesterday when I was in a Zoom meeting, I classically spilled a whole entire water bottle full of water across my computer, had it in rice for the last 24 hours, and by some miracle, that's the computer I'm working on right now, and it works fine. So But I don't know. The white rice worked really well. I don't know, but yeah, I was going to show you some just like screenshots because the last 2 weeks have been a lot of designing on the computer, of filling out, putting a whole bunch of biodiverse forests on various products like blank cards. I have a new birthday card. I've got a new 11 by 14 print, styled a lot like these two prints. Whoop. Styled a lot like these two prints of this print. You can kind of see how they fit in terms of the type. So I'm making a larger version of this at this size, except with a different color scheme because it's a larger print. I can afford more colors. For the larger one, I'm going to do more of like a rainbow of trees, where I have like the blue spruces and the green trees and then the fall colors. So it's a little bit more of like a pride print in a way. But yeah, so that's one thing.
Lindsay, can I ask a question or two?
Yeah.
There are a couple of really good color palette questions. So as you're talking about color palette,
Sure.
I thought that would be good.
Sure.
You know, you have such a wonderful specific color palette. So a broad kind of question is like, how do you choose your color palette? Like what kind of criteria or inspiration, or like, how do you come to that?
So the direct color palette had started, I mean, I had been using some colors repeatedly throughout my work. I just noticed that I was doing this on my own for a while. Like I used this blush a lot, but there was like variance in it, like darker and lighter and all sorts of other things like that. And then when I went to do the printed walk, I was like, okay, I've got 22 designs here and I really want them to each stand on their own, but then also to look awesome in a gallery together. And so I knew that in order to do that, I think color was like a huge factor. And so I had chosen, I think it was like only 10 or 12 colors that were already colors that I was using a lot of, but I introduced a couple new colors, kind of like this purple actually, and this lighter purple, which I happen to have paper of, but also in prints. You can kind of see some of them here. Like here's a good purple one. Yeah. So there's a handful in terms of color that I had started setting like a good 10 colors, 10, 12 colors for that project. And then after that project, I was like, okay, I want to stick to these colors, but I think I need to expand it just a little bit so that I can have a little bit more variation among all my products. I do a lot of craft fairs, or did before COVID. And so I felt like it was pretty important to, when somebody walks by your booth, to look like all your products are made by the same person. And so having a consistent color palette was a lot of that decision making. When I chose colors, it was kind of really what I was already using. I tend to go for more earth tones. Honestly, the Pantone booklet is very much a guideline for me. So I learned in college that I am actually synesthetic. I have color synesthesia. I had no idea I had had it all my life, and then I happened to be in a discussion class and somebody described the symptoms and I was like, hold up, rewind, tell me again, because that's exactly what's been going through my head. And I told my roommate about it last week and she thought I was minorly autistic, and I was like, excuse me? And I was like, maybe, I don't know, but like, yeah, so I was very into color. So color synesthesia is basically, which also makes a lot of sense why I'm into typography. Basically, it's like every color in the alphabet, or every letter in the alphabet and every number is like a very specific color in my mind. So when I'm like remembering, so I was also a Spanish minor. So when I was remembering like Spanish vocab, a lot of the ways that I was good at Spanish vocab was through color. So I would like remember the first letter of the word because I knew what color it was. And then I would kind of break down the word in my head based on the colors that were popping up, and I knew what letters those were. So that's just how my brain has always worked. So I think color has always been very specific in my head because each of those letters and numbers are a very specific color. They're not just like yellow. It's like, no, it's this one shade of yellow. So I think that's kind of where color came about. Yeah.
That's amazing. I had no idea about that, about you. That's amazing. Along with that question, they were asking, like, do you mix up a couple pounds of your colors since you might use them again and again, or how do you store as you use different colors?
Yeah, so I'll bring you over to some inking. So let's see here. I've got my little inking table. I have slowly been transitioning from using little plastic ramekins for color. And when I did the printed walk, it was like each color I was mixing with my bigger palette knife. This is the one palette knife that Henry passed down to me, and the rest, I don't know, did he only use one palette knife? I was like, what? But so the one palette knife from Henry, normally I'm using these smaller guys to mix, especially for client prints. It just feels, I learned it from Ray and Jill from like Graffiti. They always use these. I don't know, I just feel like I have more control over the mixing. But when I'm mixing my colors, a lot of the time I'm forced to get to the big palette knife because I'm using so much ink. It's very much, it's like, I could be, if I need to re-up on one color in my color palette, it could be like a good hour of color matching before I'm like set on it. And then when I actually go to print with it, it's like, we might do some more trial and error to make sure it's right. So as I said, I'm pretty anal about the color. So I was using these plastic guys, but I'm very much into trying to transition my business into a lot more zero waste mindset in all aspects of business. And these are plastic. And after the ink, if you have a lot of opaque white in one, and after the ink like settles for a couple months, if you have a lot of opaque white, it'll just like crust, and this whole thing will just like and like suck down, and you can't even open it anymore, and the whole thing's trash. So I switched over to these little canning jars. And so I only have 4 colors, I think, in these canning jars now, because that's all I've had to remix after switching over. But yeah, they seem to work really well. They hold the color well. Somebody, when I posted them on Instagram, pointed out that if you dropped them in the shop, then you're screwed. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like the last time I've dropped, other than the water bottle on my computer yesterday, I don't know when the last time I dropped a piece of glass. So fingers crossed that doesn't happen. But otherwise, I mean, so far they've worked really well. And it just makes more sense when I'm sticking to like a set of colors. And I'm mixing so much of one. So yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily pounds of ink because something else I've been doing with ink is that I'll mix an opaque white version of the color and then a transparent white version of the color so that I have the versatility. When I'm printing, I'm often using opaque white as my white. But when I'm designing and just working on these little proofing presses here, I'm doing the Verkman technique oftentimes that I had learned from Ray and Jill from Like Graffiti, which is from H.N. Verkman, who's an old designer who's gone by now as far as I know. And yeah, he passed away early, I forgot. He was assassinated, was he not? I think. Anyway, story aside. But I'm often like stamping to like just design stuff. And so when I'm inking up stuff to design, it's just a lot easier and things tend to look better in terms of just like quick sketches with transparent white ink. So they just like layer better, dry a little faster. And they're very much just like sketches for me to be able to like figure out composition. Kind of like how I was doing with the cut paper stuff. And then would take that into production probably with opaque white later. But yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much. I know I always wanted to hear more about your color, so that was good.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes. Do you mind if we do some questions? Or is there any other last projects you wanted to show?
No, I mean, I'm just working on a handful of new things, but they're all exciting and you guys will all see them soon enough anyways. So I say, let's go to questions. Yeah,
cool. And I'll repost
visuals for them, so it's like, yeah.
How do you sign up for your subscription?
On my website, Scott, I recognize his voice. I can't even see his face. On my website, yeah, you can go on. It's hot off the press. It's listed under shop. There's also a whole page that talks about the subscription. Just click on subscription. But yeah. It might be going up to $60 or $65 in the next week or two, because that's one of the things I'm working on this week is upping my prices. I'm trying to be able to have a tree for every product that I make planted. That's been a long-term goal of mine. Last spring, I had joined the National Forest Foundation Small Business Partnership. And basically, I donate $100 to them every 6 months, and it plants 100 trees. And I'd like to be able to donate more. And I've always wanted to like build it out to be like, okay, however many products I sold in the last 6 months, that's how many trees we're going to plant. So yeah, I'm upping some pricing, fair warning. But it's for the better. We're going to plant some trees with it in national forests. Yeah.
And you can still buy an extra one and give them to friends.
Exactly.
Affordable friend gifts. I did put your subscription link over there.
Awesome.
Join me, Scott, in getting a subscription. They're fun to get.
They're fun. Yeah. Do we have any other questions right now?
Yeah, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, before I ask the question, when you were showing those pieces from your subscription box, like I was like, whoa, do you see on the wall over there in the corner?
Yeah.
I've got one of them. Like I bought that at Signal Return. I had no idea there was going to be a connection. I guess when I bought it, I just liked it. I didn't pay attention to who it was. So it's like, and then you showed, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So that's funny. But also I think I saw somebody say something about Alexander Radchenko, but I also wanted to know, like, are you influenced by Bauhaus design at all? I've been looking at Bauhaus design a lot this summer, and with the geometric shapes and stuff, I wondered about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a whole bookshelf of books over here, and there's like a good chunk that are Bauhaus stuff. This is all like type and letterpress books up here. My dad helped me build a very hefty shelf in order to house all those books. Yeah, Bauhaus for sure. I have some like Russian constructivist books as well that have been very inspiring too. Definitely influenced by them. Yeah. And Signal Return's awesome. They're like such a great supporter. I love them. Yeah. Any other questions right now? Anything you want to see in the shop other that I might have missed?
Actually, one of the things I wouldn't mind mentioning.
Oh, sorry.
One of the things I wouldn't mind mentioning is that the printed walk is really an amazing set of prints, 22 prints, and to be so absolutely visual. I mean, it's really an amazing set of images in the world of letterpress, which just avoids, on the front of them at least, typography in every possible way. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I might be trying to involve some more typography soon, very abstractly. I actually was signed up for David Wolski's class with SVC for this morning, but I totally got the times wrong. And like, I thought it was 10 to 12 Eastern time. I don't know why I was thinking that. They're on the Pacific Coast. But yeah, so I'm signed up for his April date now. But it's all about his ISO printing. So I'm excited to see if I can work in some like abstracted type from like my wood type here in the shop, which I think will be fun. And some of the shapes that I had pulled from the printed walk are actually like printed type that is then cropped and then like scanned in and either blown up or shrunk. Like some, here's a good one. This mustard shape at the bottom is the bottom of a G, actually. So I have like a couple things that are inspired by type and cutting off. So I'm excited to like push that after taking David's workshop and seeing if I can incorporate that into my own style. And we'll see what happens. So I don't know. Yeah.
And I had one more good question from somebody. They wanted to know, have you seen an increase in online engagement with everything kind of happening and changing?
Yeah, I have seen an online increase for sure. When I got booted out of the studio, I don't know, it was a whole bunch of people who came swooping in and like, oh man, you guys are very sweet, who came swooping in to the point where it was just like, oh wow, that's like more money than I've made in a while. And that was really helpful. Yeah, and I was like, oh, some of those are probably pity buys, but I'll take it at this point. But yeah, overall, I'm still shipping out orders every week, which is honestly, I mean, kind of abnormal for this time of year, in terms of my normal shipping schedule. So, and I've also just been like growing the business slowly, growing the Instagram following slowly. So, and I've noticed like once Instagram following goes up, like sales online go up, which is awesome correlation. That didn't always used to happen. So that's happening more. I feel like I've gotten a little bit more base within Pittsburgh because I've been doing some collaborations with local artists here, and doing some raffles with local artists here. So that's gotten me some more exposure to this new city I'm in. Yeah, so that's helped for sure.
That's really good. And in fact, somebody was intrigued by the cropped G. Can you talk about that process? I'm sure you'll learn more from David as well, about how you did the cropped G.
So it's not actually wood type being printed. It was wood type in my shop being proofed and then cut up. The paper was cut up to like, and I did a handful of these. I think I posted an Instagram about it when I was way back like designing the printed walk prints, but I had a handful of different type. I had at least like 9 that I had like pulled that were crops of various letter forms of wood type that I had just cut the actual print and cropped to make them look like landscape forms. So I'm hoping to like bring that in a little bit more, because while I enjoy like carving my own plywood blocks for some of the big shapes, like I've got a nice collection of stuff here that has plenty of shapes that I can work within. And so I'd like to kind of bring in my wood type more, especially when it's not getting used in workshops right now. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we've come to our hour. I want to say thank you, Lindsay. That was amazing. We really appreciate you spending time and showing us around. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so great seeing everybody. Thank you for coming out. And yeah, I'm glad I could do this little show and tell with you guys.